Declan Dunn was Liverpool's most feared criminal mastermind, a shadowy kingpin who ruled the city's underworld for nearly 2 decades. Tommy Griggs, his closest lieutenant, held secrets darker than anyone imagined. Together, their twisted alliance would unravel a mystery that shook a city to its core. Until one cold morning, Declan was found dead in an abandoned warehouse, sparking a chain of events nobody saw coming. Declan Dunn's rise to power in Liverpool's underworld didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't built on brute force alone. Born in 1980 in the tough north end of the city, Declan was the youngest of 4 in a family that struggled to get by. His father was in and out of prison, and his mother worked long shifts just to keep the lights on. From a young age, Declan saw what poverty did to people, how it broke spirits, hardened hearts, and made rules feel optional. But unlike the kids around him who turned to violence or addiction, Declan turned to strategy. He started small, running errands for local dealers, passing messages, keeping watch. But even at 16, there was something different about him. He was quiet, observant, and calculated. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. Within 2 years, he'd earned the trust of older gang members by staying loyal and keeping his head down. He wasn't the one to pull a knife or start a fight. Instead, he found ways to solve problems before they exploded. By 19, Declan was running his own crew, controlling street-level drug sales in parts of Kirkdale and Walton. As the money started to flow, he kept his operations tight and his circle tighter. He didn't allow chaos. Every runner, every supplier, every corner was managed with discipline. If someone got sloppy, they were out. No second chances. If someone got caught, Declan made sure they were looked after. This quiet professionalism earned him respect not just from his own people, but from rival crews. While others chased fast cars and fame, Declan played the long game. He reinvested in the business, expanded slowly, and avoided headlines. By his mid-20s, he was no longer just another street boss. He was a rising force. He bought off low-level officers, struck deals with foreign suppliers, and started to build a reputation that extended beyond Liverpool. But he stayed invisible. No photos, no arrests, no online footprint. He became a ghost with power, and the city began to whisper his name like a warning. For the next 2 decades, Declan Dunn wouldn't just survive in the criminal world, he would control it. And the foundations of that empire were laid not with violence, but with patience, intelligence, and a ruthless commitment to staying ahead of everyone else. By the early 2000s, Declan Dunn had built something far more dangerous than a street gang. He had created an invisible empire. From the outside, there was little to see. No flashy lifestyle, no public outbursts, no arrests. But behind the scenes he controlled a vast network that stretched from the docks of Liverpool to suppliers in mainland Europe. Drugs, weapons, counterfeit currency, whatever turned a profit passed through Declan's hands, yet nothing ever led back to him. He never used phones for business. Instructions were delivered face-to-face by trusted intermediaries. Meetings were unannounced, held in random locations, sometimes as brief as a minute. Every message was filtered through layers of lieutenants, so even if someone talked, they never had enough information to bring him down. He didn't leave fingerprints, not just literally but operationally. Declan understood that power wasn't about being feared on the street. It was about being untouchable. His drug operations ran like a legitimate business. Couriers were vetted and monitored. Each shipment was tracked through unspoken systems that only his most senior men understood. Distribution points changed weekly, and anyone too visible was replaced. He had contacts inside the port, men who turned a blind eye to certain containers and ensured that inspection records were clean. The cocaine came in hidden inside fruit crates, car parts, or industrial supplies. By the time it hit the streets, it had passed through so many hands that the trail was untraceable. Declan also invested in legal fronts, small logistics companies, storage units, pubs, and even a few car washes. These businesses served as cover for laundering dirty money and moving product undetected. Authorities suspected some of these links, but nothing ever stuck. When they raided one of his storage units, they found only expired cleaning supplies. When they seized his van, the driver had a spotless record and the van was empty. Police surveillance operations constantly came up short. Declan's movements were unpredictable. He didn't stick to routines. When he traveled, he used different vehicles, different routes, and always had someone sweep the area first. Even inside his organization, most had never seen him face to face. For many, Declan Dunn was more of a myth than a man. And that was exactly how he wanted it. His greatest weapon wasn't force or fear, it was invisibility. In 2011, law enforcement believed they finally had enough to bring down Declan Dunn. After years of watching their investigations fall apart, a new task force was assembled, combining resources from Merseyside Police, the National Crime Agency, and intelligence from European partners, codenamed Operation Serpent. It was the most ambitious attempt yet to dismantle the empire Declan had built in silence. The operation was planned in total secrecy, with only a handful of top officers aware of its full scope. Surveillance teams were deployed across the city, tracking known associates, monitoring storage facilities, and intercepting encrypted communications. For months, detectives collected what they believed were critical pieces of evidence. A late-night meeting in an industrial park, a van linked to a known trafficker, leaving one of Declan's suspected safe houses, a conversation caught on a hidden microphone that hinted at a large shipment arriving through the port. The task force mapped out Declan's network and identified key players, including his longtime lieutenant Tommy Griggs. Raids were timed with precision. On a rainy night in October, police struck simultaneously across 12 locations, arresting over 20 individuals and seizing over £3 million worth of cocaine and heroin. Among the items confiscated were burner phones, encrypted laptops, and large stacks of unregistered cash. The media hailed it as a breakthrough. Headlines screamed that Liverpool's most wanted man was finally cornered. But behind the scenes, something wasn't right. Despite the operation's scale, Declan himself was nowhere to be found. None of the seized phones had messages from him. None of the arrested individuals named him. The encrypted devices contained no usable data. As the suspects were processed, legal cracks began to form. Evidence was dismissed due to chain of custody issues. Key surveillance footage had mysteriously gone missing, and then, one by one, witnesses began to change their stories or fall silent altogether. In court, the prosecution's case collapsed. The arrests amounted to mid-level dealers, not decision-makers. Declan's name was never spoken aloud during the proceedings. With no direct links to the evidence, the case fell apart within months. Declan Dunn remained free, untouched, and more powerful than ever. For law enforcement, Operation Serpent was more than a failure. It was a public humiliation. For Declan, it was confirmation that his system worked. Even with every eye on him, he had remained invisible. And now, he was watching closely, learning from their every mistake. While Declan Dunn maintained control over Liverpool's underworld with quiet precision, cracks were beginning to form beneath the surface. The old ways, the discipline, the secrecy, the order were no longer respected by everyone. A new generation of criminals was rising, younger and more reckless, drawn not to the structure Declan had built, but to the chaos and quick money that came with violence. They wanted their names known, their reputations feared, and their wealth flaunted. It was everything Declan had avoided, and it posed a growing threat to his empire. Small-time gangs started to challenge his authority, particularly on the city's outskirts. Turf disputes became more frequent. Drug deals once managed with efficiency turned messy. Shootings in broad daylight began to attract media attention, bringing more heat than Declan was used to. At first he ignored it. He believed his name still carried enough weight to keep order, but the younger crews didn't care about legacy. They wanted power now, and they were willing to risk everything for it. The most serious threat came from across the M62. A gang from Manchester had begun moving heroin through Liverpool's South End, bypassing Declan's network entirely. It was a bold move, one that no outsider had attempted in over a decade. Declan didn't retaliate immediately. He waited, watched, gathered information. When he responded, it was with the same cold efficiency that had built his empire. A safe house linked to the Manchester crew went up in flames. Days later, one of their lieutenants was found floating in the canal. No statements were made. No warnings were issued. The message was clear. Liverpool was still his. Yet the violence didn't stop. Younger members within Declan's own ranks began questioning his methods. Some wanted to retaliate more aggressively. Others whispered about cutting their own deals. Declan noticed the shift, loyalty fading, ambition growing. He tightened his circle even further, trusting only a handful of longtime associates. Meetings became rarer, instructions even more vague, but the atmosphere had changed. There was tension where there used to be control. He was still in charge, but the city was moving beneath him. The new breed of criminals didn't want to inherit his system. They wanted to replace it. For the first time in years, Declan faced a reality he had long avoided. His empire was no longer untouchable. It was under siege from within and without. And the enemy wasn't just the police or the rivals. It was time itself. On the morning of January 14, 2025, Liverpool awoke to a silence far heavier than the usual winter stillness. In the grey light of dawn, a real estate agent arrived at a derelict warehouse near the docks. The building, long abandoned and scheduled for demolition, had stood empty for years. Cold, lifeless, forgotten. But what the agent found inside would send shockwaves across the entire city. There, in the center of the concrete floor, lay the body of Declan Dunn. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no bruises, no weapons. He looked almost at peace, as if he had simply laid down and gone to sleep. His clothes were neat, undisturbed, his face was calm. Even seasoned investigators, hardened by years of violent crime scenes, were unnerved by how still and unmarked he was. It didn't look like a murder. It didn't look like a suicide. It didn't look like anything at all. Forensics were baffled. Toxicology reports showed no traces of drugs, poison, or alcohol, no signs of trauma. His heart had stopped, but no one could explain why. The body showed no signs of being moved. There were no footprints in the dust around him. The only item found on him was a small, unmarked key tucked into his jacket pocket, cold, clean, and offering no immediate clues. CCTV footage in the area led nowhere. The nearest camera had been disabled 3 days prior. None of the nearby businesses saw anything unusual. No vehicles were reported coming or going from the warehouse during the time frame when investigators believed Declan had died. His phone had last pinged a tower on the opposite side of the city, nearly 8 hours earlier. Somehow he had ended up alone in that warehouse, without a trace of how he got there or why. News of his death spread quickly. The media was cautious at first, unsure if it was really him. But the police confirmed it within hours. Declan Dunn, Liverpool's most feared and most elusive figure, was dead, and nobody had seen it coming. His empire didn't erupt in violence immediately. Instead, the city held its breath. Rivals didn't celebrate. Former allies didn't mourn publicly. Fear lingered in the silence, because if someone like Declan Dunn could vanish and die without a mark, without a witness, without an explanation, then no one was safe. As investigators tried to make sense of Declan Dunn's sudden and silent death, attention turned to the strange item found in his pocket, a small, unmarked key. It didn't match any local lock records, and it offered no clues, no tag, no number, no branding, but it was the only tangible lead in a case that had left detectives with more questions than answers. After days of dead ends, one officer decided to test the key on various locations linked to Declan's past. It finally clicked open a false wall inside a rarely used flat registered to a shell company tied to one of his former associates. Behind that wall was a safe. Inside the safe was a single leather-bound ledger, worn, handwritten, and filled with codes. But this was no ordinary list of debts or transactions. Once decoded, the names and dates pointed to a network far deeper and more dangerous than anyone had expected. Declan hadn't just run a drug empire, he had been documenting every secret, every deal, and every betrayal for years. The ledger included names of rival gang leaders, sure, but also lawyers, businessmen, customs officials, and even police officers. Some entries referenced bribes, others hinted at blackmail. There were payment logs, meeting details, and a few ominous notes with words like insurance and last resort. Each page revealed another layer of the silent power Declan had held over the city. He hadn't stayed untouchable through fear alone. He had stayed safe by knowing everything about everyone. This discovery changed everything. The case was no longer about a mysterious death. It was about a time bomb. Investigators now had a book full of names that could cause careers to collapse and trials to be reopened. The question was, who else knew about the ledger? The police kept it under strict lock and key, only a few senior officials aware of its existence. But word spread quietly. People started disappearing. One low-level gang member turned up dead in a car fire. A former customs agent was found in his flat. An apparent overdose. It was clear the secrets inside the ledger were dangerous, and someone was already working to erase them. Declan Dunn had ruled Liverpool with information, and in death, he was still pulling strings. The ledger wasn't just evidence, it was a target, and whoever wanted Declan dead likely wanted that book destroyed. As detectives sifted through the tangled web surrounding Declan Dunn's death, suspicion grew that the answer lay not with rival gangs or external enemies, but within his own inner circle. The ledger had exposed dangerous alliances and betrayals, and the police believed someone close to Declan had turned against him. The focus quickly shifted to his longtime lieutenant, Tommy Griggs, a man who had been by Declan's side for over 15 years and managed much of the day-to-day operations. Tommy had always been loyal on the surface, known for his quiet demeanor and unshakable presence, but phone records revealed something alarming. Frequent and secretive communications with a shadowy fixer, linked to international criminal groups, particularly a cartel operating out of the Netherlands. This connection raised questions about whether Tommy had been playing a double game, potentially betraying Declan to secure his own position or gain favor with more powerful players beyond Liverpool. CCTV footage added to the mystery. The night before Declan's body was found, Tommy was seen alone near the abandoned warehouse. He arrived late and left early, with no one else seen entering or exiting alongside him. His movements didn't match the usual careful routines Declan had imposed on his crew. Despite intensive questioning, Tommy denied involvement or knowledge of Declan's death, sticking to vague answers and claiming he had been making deliveries. Inside the task force, investigators debated whether Tommy had orchestrated the death or had been forced into complicity. Some believed he saw Declan's empire weakening and sought to take control by eliminating the boss. Others suspected Tommy had been manipulated, a pawn in a larger game involving the Dutch cartel that had been pushing into Liverpool's drug routes for years. What puzzled the police most was the precision of the killing. No violence, no chaos, no trace. It suggested the killer had intimate knowledge of Declan's habits and vulnerabilities. Only someone close could have arranged such a clean, untraceable death. Tommy's access to Declan's movements and inner sanctum made him the prime suspect. As the investigation deepened, tensions rose within the criminal underworld. Tommy's name circulated quietly in whispers and rumors. Allies began to distance themselves, and while the police tightened their grip, Tommy vanished without a trace, leaving behind a growing list of questions and a city wondering if betrayal had finally claimed Liverpool's most feared king. Following the trail of phone calls and secret meetings, investigators uncovered connections that stretched far beyond Liverpool's docks. The most significant lead pointed to Rotterdam, one of Europe's busiest ports, where a well-organized syndicate had been quietly expanding its reach. This Dutch cartel had long eyed Liverpool's strategic location as a gateway for smuggling narcotics into the UK. For years, Declan Dunn had resisted their advances, refusing to share control or merge his operations. His stubborn independence made him a major obstacle. The cartel operated with ruthless efficiency. They controlled shipments moving through Rotterdam and had deep ties to corrupt officials who ensured cargo passed with minimal inspection. It became clear that Tommy Griggs, Declan's lieutenant, had been the key link between Liverpool and the Dutch. His secret communications weren't just casual conversations, they were negotiations. The cartel wanted full control of Liverpool's drug routes and they were willing to do whatever it took to get it. Evidence suggested that Tommy had struck a dangerous deal. In exchange for betraying Declan, he was promised a leadership role within the merged organization and a cut of the profits. But this alliance was fragile. The cartel viewed Tommy as expendable once Declan was out of the picture. Their interest was control, not loyalty. Dutch law enforcement cooperated with the UK task force, sharing intelligence that painted a chilling picture of the syndicate's reach. The cartel had orchestrated similar takeovers in other ports across Europe, using a combination of bribery, intimidation, and violence. Liverpool was just another prize. The investigators pieced together a timeline. In the weeks before Declan's death, Tommy had traveled multiple times between Liverpool and Rotterdam, meeting with cartel representatives in secret locations. Shortly after Declan's body was found, several suspicious shipments passed through the port unchallenged, raising alarms about compromised security. The discovery of these international ties shifted the investigation from a local crime to a global conspiracy. The police realized Declan's empire was part of a larger network of criminal enterprises, linked by geography and greed. Tommy Griggs was no longer just a suspect. He was a key player in an international power struggle. But just as the net seemed to tighten, Tommy disappeared. His sudden vanishing act added another layer of mystery. Was he running from the cartel, from the police, or from something even more dangerous? The answers remained elusive, but one thing was certain. Declan Dunn's death was not the end. It was only the beginning of a battle for control that would shake Liverpool and beyond. As the investigation unfolded, Liverpool's criminal landscape grew increasingly unstable. Declan Dunn's death left a power vacuum, and rival factions scrambled to claim pieces of the empire he once controlled. Yet the most unsettling development wasn't the open clashes or violent turf wars. It was the sudden wave of disappearances and quiet threats that swept through the city's underworld. Former associates of Declan began vanishing without explanation. Some were found weeks later, their bodies hidden in abandoned buildings or dumped along the Mersey's banks, showing signs of deliberate silencing. Others simply stopped answering calls or failed to appear for scheduled meetings. The message was clear. Anyone who knew too much or threatened to expose secrets would be eliminated. The mysterious ledger recovered from the safe remained locked away by police, but rumors of its contents spread like wildfire. Criminals, corrupt officials, and even some law enforcement officers feared the exposure of their names. Whispers of blackmail and hidden alliances fueled paranoia. Trust evaporated, alliances fractured, and betrayal became the new currency. Amid this chaos, new players emerged, young, ambitious criminals with little patience for the old guard's caution. They used social media and flashy displays of wealth to challenge the established order, sparking a wave of reckless violence. Shootouts erupted in neighborhoods that had been relatively calm for years, and the city's sense of security frayed. Meanwhile, the international cartel linked to Declan's death tightened its grip, exploiting the disorder to expand its operations. Their presence was felt in unexpected places. Nightclubs, shipping yards, and even legitimate businesses used as fronts. Law enforcement struggled to keep pace with the evolving threat, hindered by limited resources and the complexity of transnational crime. Despite the growing turmoil, no one could forget Declan Dunn. His death had shattered the illusion of control that had once defined Liverpool's criminal underworld. For many, his name remained a symbol of power and fear, a ghost haunting a city caught between lawlessness and order. The question lingering in the minds of detectives and citizens alike was simple but chilling. Who had truly orchestrated Declan's fall, and how far would the consequences ripple? As Liverpool faced an uncertain future, one truth became clear.